Welcome. This is our second TCC book club. We had an amazing conversation with Karen Dillon, the former editor of the Harvard Business Review and three-time New York Times bestselling author, last month, and we are very excited for today. So let me just give you an update, real quick update, guys, on what's going on with the book club. So our next book that we're actually starting to read today is Jason Redman's book, Overcome. Jason is a decorated Navy SEAL. His story is absolutely phenomenal. And he's going to be joining us in April, but this is the book that we're supposed to be reading in March. And then I'll give you one more sneak preview. The month following, in case you want to get ahead, we're going to be reading Kim Scott's book, Radical Candor. This is a New York Times bestseller, and Kim's going to be joining us. I'm really, really excited about that. Real quickly, Conversations with Legends series, which is where you guys first met Dana. We've got Antonia Hawk on the 8th. So next week, next Tuesday, we've got Antonia Hawk. She is the global head of the Ritz-Carlton Leadership Center. And then on the 22nd, we've got Kate Luzio, who's the CEO of Luminary. So we're really, really looking forward to that. So I don't want to shortchange us on time, so I'm going to dive right in. Today, we're joined by a good friend of the TCC, Dana Cavalea. Coach Cavalea wrote his first book, Habits of a Champion, which is so damn good that now every TCC member gets a copy. Dana signs all of these for our members. So if you're a new member, you should have your copy. But he followed that up with the book that we're going to talk about today, which is Habits of a Champion Team. And it is off the charts, unbelievably good. The other thing that I think a lot of people don't know is that Dana has written multiple books for children that are really, really incredible. So I've gifted them to a number of people that absolutely, have just said glowing things about them. So if you go on Amazon, check out all the books that Dana's written because they're absolutely phenomenal. So I'm going to give a super quick bio on Dana. I think most of you guys know that Coach Cavalea was the longtime director of performance for the New York Yankees and worked with literally the icons of the day, the Derek Jeters, the Mariano Riveras, the Alex Rodriguez's, you name it, Andy Pettitte, Jorge Posada, and helped lead them to a world championship in 2009. That was the same year that he won the Nolan Ryan Award, which he was recognized by his peers of performance coaches. So Dana knows a thing or two about how to build championship teams. The cool thing is now he is helping CEOs and other people outside of sports to do what he so successfully did with the New York Yankees. So Dana, I cannot thank you enough. Every time you join us, it is a huge hit. And I'm excited to dive into the new book today. So thanks for coming on.
Cool. Thanks for having me. And, I'm one of those people, I look forward to Scott's emails every week to say, okay, who's coming up next? What's next? And I feel like I've watched this, program grow from its origin. So it's kind of cool to see a lot of faces that I recognize and those that are new. So for those that are new, welcome and thanks for having me. And this is definitely a place to be to enrich yourself and enrich your team. So
awesome. So I want you to give us, for those people who maybe are, because we have some brand new members on this call. And just a reminder, what we're going to do, Dana and I are going to chat. He's going to talk a little bit about the book. That'll go for about another 20 minutes or so. And then we're going to open it up for questions. So all you have to do is in the chat, just say, I have a question. You don't have to put your question in there, and we'll tee you up and you can ask Dana your question, and it'll give you the answer. So I want you to give the new folks that haven't had a chance to dive into the book kind of an overview of why you wrote it and kind of the premise behind it. And then I want to focus real quickly on two things that I think are really, really prominent today. And the first is, you talk about, in one of the first chapters, you talk about a championship culture. And I will say that when we're talking to candidates, Dana, the only common denominator that we ever hear is that people are looking for a great culture. But culture can be defined many different ways. So I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit in depth, that championship culture, how it starts at the top, how everything matters. And then I also want to focus on something we are constantly hearing about, the Great Resignation. And in one of the final chapters of the book, you talk about people are going to quit, and that's good. And you talk about grading your team, and it's a really, I thought, a very interesting chapter. But kind of give us your thoughts on the book as a whole, and then if we could focus on that culture and the quitting aspect, I'd appreciate it.
You got it. I'm not that smart, so I had to write that down so I could remember everything. But no, you know what inspired this book was, it was very simple. Like, what I try to do is just always very simply put pieces of a puzzle together. So I look out into, you know, the world and the digital world. Let's use LinkedIn as a digital world, because I know we're all there. And I say, okay, what's happening here? What are the common threads of dialogue that I see? What are the opinions that I see that are grouped and clustered together? Okay, let's go challenge those, because are they actual, or are people just jumping on because it's the thing to do right now? So whenever I see that, I see a point of entry to challenge something. So when I first wrote the book, Habits of a Champion, I wrote that book because I saw a gap between personal development as a theory and personal development in actuality. So here I am working with all these high performers in sport and in business. And then I read these books and I say, oh my God, I must be doing everything incorrect, because what I'm reading here, these people are doing almost none of it. And what I realized was that there was this gap between actual and practical and what sells and what sounds good. So I said, let me close the gap, being an on-field, in the trenches type coach, and write this book. So I write the first book, Habits of a Champion, and then I get a bunch of calls. Hey, can you come talk to my team? Can you come talk to my team? Can you come talk to my team? So that word, right, putting the simple steps together, was team. So I said, well, I have Habits of a Champion, which is about an individual. It's about a story of overcoming. Well, what if I created a handbook and a leadership guide like this for teams? So what should I call it? Well, we'll just add the word team, right? So I tend to work in a very linear format that's as simple as it gets, because when we start to look too deep into things, and I see this when I coach people all the time, the deeper we get and the more we think, the more we overthink, and the more action is crutched and it's inhibited. So we can't have that, because the catalyst of all success is action. So when I created this book, Habits of a Champion Team, it was simply about saying, hey, leader, I want you to read this. And then I want your team to read it. And I want you to realize that you're all leaders. And if you're all leaders and you all deploy the principles in this book, you will be a team that is more focused on winning and less focused on what sounds good and what feels good and all that touchy-feely bullshit. So that's what I wanted to share with people, because, you know, to win at anything, whether it's in sport and whether it's in business, it's great to, you know, be a servant leader, and it's great to be all of that. But you also have to have an edge about you. And the edge is this: I refuse to lose. We refuse to lose. So as a result, our chances of losing go way down and our chances of winning go way up. So when I put this together, it was simply to give people a guide to also say, hey, it's okay to go against the grain. It's okay to go against the way everybody else, says you should lead and the way you should do things. Because like when you read a lot of books, let's say you take a John Maxwell book and you compare it to another leadership book in a similar genre, you're going to hear and feel a lot of the same things. When I write these books, I don't want you to feel that way. I want you to actually feel like you're on the top of a hill, and you just put a flag in the ground and said, this is how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to own the way in which I do it. And I'm going to own the way I feel. And I'm just going to be so excited to be me as I drive this business, this company, this life that I have forward. And I'm not going to accept anything less. And I'm going to do it my way because it's the only way I know how to do it. And I just want to put books like this in people's hands to let them know, hey, you have power and there's not one way to do things, but you have to own the way in which you want to do things. You want to build a business, build it with your swagger. You want to run a team, run it with swagger, right? You want to do anything in this world, do it. And you can, but you have to own what it is you're doing and don't be so persuaded. If people push on you and push against you, let them. Don't fold. Don't cave. Appreciate the questions that they may have, but don't adapt and become who they want you to be, or else we will all be the same.
So anyone that is not following Dana's content, you had a post the other day that I thought was phenomenal. And it was about the new CEO of Peloton, who said, we're not a family. And you agreed with it, and I agree with it as well. But it's an example of, the popular thing to say today is, oh, we're a family, kumbaya type of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's actually what prompted me to post something about people over everything, because I think sometimes people think that people over everything is this warm, fuzzy kind of kumbaya thing. And yes, I think you have to have empathy for your employees. You've got to love on your employees, but people over everything is really the way that you succeed in business. It's the way that you recognize that people are the drivers that are going to make you successful. So it's less about that kind of kumbaya stuff and more about how do you just be a successful business.
Yeah.
But anyway, follow Dana's content. It's unbelievable.
Thank you. Thank you. And I feel like alongside that, I actually don't use the word love as it relates to business and people outside of you loving what you do, because when you love what you do, you create an infectious energy and people naturally feel that. But I like to use the word challenge, like challenge your people, right? If I were to speak and coach with every person on this line individually, I would say, well, what do you want to do? What is it that you're after? And I would challenge you every day and hold you accountable to that. And you will either step up or you will realize that you don't want what you say you want, and we'll find out what you really want. So we've gotten out of a rhythm. And again, I coach a lot of CEOs that tell me how they really feel. And I coach a lot of executives that tell me how they really feel, and they don't feel the way they have to present themselves as feeling as a result of, them feeling that they have to present themselves a certain way. So we have to get real and we have to get honest. And that's how you really help people. What I love about sports is it's so raw. Like you could just tell a guy, you suck. And he'll tell you back, I fucking suck. Can you help me? Right. So pardon my language, but that's what you would hear in an environment that is built on succeed or get released. And when a professional athlete doesn't succeed, they get told you have to go home now, and they get their salary cut, right? They don't make any money. They're done. Bye. Unless they're on a guaranteed deal, which again, the majority of players are not. They get cut, they have to go home, and they have to figure their life out. They never get a call from that GM to say, hey, Mike, how you doing? Is everything okay since I let you go? It's a very different environment, but it's built on this competitiveness, and it's built on team, and it's built on performance. And, I always say if more people worked on, finding that love and connection at home, they would probably need less of it at work, or desire or demand less of it from their workplace. So I always encourage, again, I work with a lot of high octane, high performance, a lot of male executives. I say, work on your home life, and you'll see that when you're better there, you won't need as much from where it is that you work.
Talk to us about building a champion culture,
Mm,
and how important that is. And it's really our responsibility as a leader.
yeah.
Talk to us about that. I thought that was a phenomenal chapter.
Yeah. So when it comes to culture, it is definitely one of those corporate buzzwords today. It's about culture. We're all about building culture. And part of it I like, because I get brought in by people seeking better culture to improve their culture, which I appreciate. But I want to say this again, it goes with what sort of a culture are you trying to build? And how much time do you spend as a leader developing that culture by saying, hey, here's the speed of our culture. Here's how we interact with one another. Here's the language that we use, right? So we have to break culture down, because again, I think people say culture, good culture is everybody's happy. Bad culture is everybody's miserable. But what is culture? And what I find is there's a lot of great employees out there that sometimes get very frustrated because they can't keep up with the pace that the leader sets for the company. For me, when I come in and work with a company, that just shows me that there's a gap, there's a performance gap that exists. That says, here's a fast moving company and a slow moving person. That's always going to be oil and vinegar. Neither is at fault. Fast moving companies need fast moving people, right? When you work with a fast moving CEO, a high octane CEO, he's going to push you, or she's going to push you and drive you. Those that can't keep up, they're just not built for that particular culture. But there may be somewhere else that they would be phenomenal, because they're a bit of a slow mover. Like, you find an old family brand that maybe has been around for 100 years, that's not looking to set records, versus, say, an Amazon. Those are two different animals. Or one of Elon Musk's company, right? These are different companies. They're going to have different cultures, and they're going to have different speeds. So I find the root of a lot of cultural erosion is just a gap in pace. So you got to understand the pace of play. The other thing, as it relates to culture, is you have to find people that align with the style and the delivery of the leadership. So, buddy of mine is Kevin Plank. He started Under Armour, and he came in and said, hey, I'm an athlete. Who am I going to hire? I'm going to hire athletes and coaches, because those are people that understand how I'm doing it, what I'm doing, how I'm going about my business. So when I jump them and I push them and I drive them and I coach them, they're going to respond, as opposed to shutting down and saying, you're too hard on me. So culture, a lot of bad culture is the result of confusion. And it's also the result of just a bad alignment between workforce and leadership. But it's not, we can't always look at it and say, how do we make it work? Sometimes making it work is that we can't make it work. We
Yeah.
just have the wrong people. Not that they're bad, and not that the leadership is bad. They're just, there's a differential, there's a gap, and it's never going to come together. And that's okay.
So that ties into kind of that second piece that I wanted to talk about, which is, people are going to quit, and that's okay. And you talk about grading your team, and then that 8 to 12 weeks of like, okay, this is your time to shine. Talk a little bit about that, because I think that goes to what you were just talking about. You may not have cultural alignment,
Yeah.
and that's all right. Those people, just need to move on and find something that's better for them.
Yeah. We used to see this in baseball a lot. You'd bring a guy onto the team, and, for the first 3 months, he'd be like, or the first month, he'd be amazing. The second month, he'd be a little less amazing. And by the third month, you know exactly who he is, and you say, wow, this guy's really not a good fit here. So the lesson that I always take is, listen, you could only fake it so long. And that goes for anybody. Even if you're in a gig and you're doing something and you feel like you're struggling and you're forcing it, get out of there. Don't put yourself in a position to be let go. Put yourself in a position to succeed. And sometimes that position to succeed is leaving that company. And as a leader, don't tolerate mediocrity. Don't tolerate poor performance, because that person is probably not ever going to be a good fit. So too often leaders stay with people for too long, thinking the plane is just going to pick up off the runway. But that person may be dealing with something that they may not be transparent with anyway. They may not be being transparent with you, and they're not giving it 100%. So you can't be afraid to let people go. Another lesson I got from sports was, if somebody's not performing after you've given them resources and time and training to perform, they're probably not going to perform. You could figure out the reasons why, or you could just say, hey, this isn't a good fit, head on your way. And you're actually doing that person a favor. But part of another theme that runs through this book is, don't be afraid to fire yourself. Sometimes you have to fire yourself and rehire under new terms. And sometimes you need to fire yourself and go somewhere else. And it's not wrong. It doesn't make you bad. It doesn't make you poor, it just, there's a bad alignment for whatever the reason. Don't look too far into it. And that's something I always try to push forward to folks is, do not look so deep into things that you jam up your own gears. It's like, it fits or it doesn't. It's just what it is. So this great resignation, it should be cheered. You have people that realize, hey, you know what? After COVID, I don't want to sit in an office anymore. Like, I literally want to take the Scott McGregor 34-second or 32-second steps to my office deal. And that's what I prefer. That's my preference now. I didn't know that until COVID, but now I've realized that is for me. So it should be embraced, not shunned, or not even like, questioned. The other thing I see, and I'll leave this, is I work with a lot of companies, and they use surveys. They use these surveys to drive everything. And we have to be careful with that too, because sometimes surveys could be deceiving. And I was working with a big apparel company last month, and they were using surveys, and the executive leaders were totally confused. And I said, because the folks in the company, they want more decision-making power. And I said, your survey is a little bit incomplete, only because these folks want more decision-making power, but are they ready for the consequences of a bad decision? Because that comes with it. So I'm not saying surveys are good or surveys are bad, but we have to look at everything in totality, everything. And we need to be honest with ourselves.
Love it. And by the way, Dana, I'm working on my speed, so I'm hoping that I can cut my 32 seconds down to like 20, get in the 20 range.
God, don't drag your feet, man. Pick your feet up.
I know. I need higher knees, so I'm working on it. Cool. We have got a ton of people lined up for questions, so I don't want to leave anybody out. So we're going to jump into Q&A, because I think it'll cover, a lot of other topics that were in the book. So we're first going to go to my high energy brother in Colorado, Scott Garber.
Dana, what's up, brother? How you doing?
Scott, what's up, man?
Oh man, I'm living large and in charge on this
right
side.
there.
Man. Oh man, there's only one way to live this life.
Yes, sir.
Dana, I got a question. It's not as much regarding the book, but speaking more around culture and everything that's going along or going on with the MLB lockout, right? You have intimate relationships there. Jeter just stepping away from the Marlins. Would love your perspective. I think it's really timely talking about culture from the top down. Why he stepped away. Would just love your perspective around such a unique situation with the owners and the Players Association there.
Yeah, well, I think there's always been a gap between the owners and the players. They're always trying to beat one another. Players want more money. Owners want to pay limited amounts of money to those players, but now they're paying them quite a bit. So the owners feel like they're owed something, but the players feel like, hey, we fill the stands, so we're owed something still. So there's always this gap that exists. Whether it'll ever be truly closed, I don't think so. That's just one of those things. We just have to get as close as possible. In regards to a player like Derek Jeter, or an owner like Derek Jeter, you're dealing with a baseball traditionalist, so that's number one. I don't think he likes what's going on in the state of the game. He's made enough money to be in a place where he could say, hey, I don't agree with everything that's going on, so therefore I'm going to step away at this point. And there could also be some internal friction between what's going on in terms of how that organization is evolving over the last 4 to 5 years and where they see it going in the future and where he wants it to go. The one thing with a Derek Jeter is you're dealing with a very convicted guy, and he knows what he wants and he knows what he believes, and it's not up for question. So when it becomes up for question, he's smart enough, rather than getting in an altercation and take something public, to say, you know what, thanks for the opportunity, but I'm going to resign and I'm going to step over here and I'm going to do something else, whatever that something else will end up being.
Love it, man. Appreciate your perspective there.
Yeah, thank you.
Kathy Slayton, whose birthday was our last Conversations with Legends series, and I forgot to wish her happy birthday. So Kathy Slayton in Florida, you are up with Coach Cavalea.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Scott. Hey, Dana.
Hey, Kathy.
So yeah, question slash, I guess, comment, and just wanted your perspective on this. So, and you talked a couple minutes ago about just, sports players, and, if you suck, then, somebody's going to tell you, yeah, you suck. And, there's no harm in that. So my son came home the other day, and it was something to do with math, and, I guess, and he's pretty good at math. And so I guess there's some kids that the teacher said, well, I don't want anybody to say out loud that, oh yeah, that was easy. Our math was easy today. And so she told them to say that it was doable.
Yeah. And
I was like, that's it. I'm done. And I kind of cringed when I heard that. So, but I don't want to, throw her under the bus and say, but so like, how do you, like, I get frustrated as a parent because, while I don't advocate for, I wouldn't tell my son that, he sucked at something, but I obviously say, yeah, that's unacceptable, or let's work on improving, but like, how do I combat that mediocrity? Like, I don't get that. And I'm trying to coach him up.
I think that's exactly where it starts, right? When it comes to kids, you let them know that, hey, you're going into a world where you're going to hear things that you may not agree with. People are going to tell you things that you may not agree with, but you have to, it's really what happens in the home, right? So you have to continually build his confidence, knowing that there's people out there that are going to work to bring him down, that are going to work to neutralize him. So I'm just a big believer that all confidence starts in the home, and it's a parent's job to build and feed realistically their child's confidence. Like, part of what I do, I work with youth athletes as well as professional athletes. And really what I find is most of them get into really negative places when they start doubting themselves. And some parental pressures could cause kids to doubt themselves. So I always say, if you keep the base of strength at home, even when he goes into that classroom environment and the teacher says this, you guys already have a communication style that says, hey, I know she said that, but listen. And you'll give him your words of coaching and your words of advice, and let him know there's going to be a lot of people out there that try to neutralize his performance and potentially take him down. That's life. Their life, people are out there trying to beat all of us, in different ways, right? Whether you run a staffing company, there's somebody that looks at that company and says, hey, I want to do better than this guy. So life is competitive. Build yourself, build your families, build your kids up for that battle. I wrote something yesterday. It was called, are you a dream builder or are you a dream killer? And oftentimes, even as parents, you can become dream killers. But it's your job to feed that kid, build them, challenge them, push them in a good way, and be realistic at all times. But there's always going to be people out there that are working to, working against, him and or her. and you just have to build them up at home. That's my advice on that. I don't get into teacher warfare and, we have to go against this and too much. Start at home and keep that strength right there.
All right. Thanks. Good advice.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy.
We're going to stay in Florida. We're going to go to Tom Doherty. Tom, you are up.
Well, I'm in California, not Florida, first off.
Sorry.
Okay.
My screw
Sounds
up.
like Boston.
I am a Boston fan. I was going to wear my Red Sox hat, but I wanted to be respectful, Dana.
That's okay. That's why I wear white.
I was reading your book this morning, and I was reading the chapter on Moxie. And it was a great trip down memory lane, because I haven't heard the word Moxie since my grandmother was alive, right? I used to hear that Moxie all the time. But I'm curious to hear from you, why do you think leaders and companies are really struggling in this area to build culture today?
They're scared. That's it. I think it's that simple. Every CEO I talk to, they're killers deep down, but they're scared to death. They're scared of the consequences of actually showing who they really are and being attacked. I mean, I have a couple CEOs that I work with that said, listen, one of the things I loved the most about my job was mentoring young people in our company. Said, unfortunately, I will never do that anymore. I can't do it for young males, and I can't do it for young females because I don't feel comfortable. There's been some incidences and cases and things like that where if I ever do sit down, I have to have somebody else with me, and I have to have a door open. And it's just, they sit back and they say, listen, I live a great life as is. I don't need the aggravation. So it inhibits their ability to lead, to develop, to lean in. All of those things are inhibited because they can't be themselves. And then we wonder, and then they gain a reputation as X. Meanwhile, they're gaining a reputation for somebody that's not even the true them. And that's why I'm fortunate for what I get to do, because I tell them, hey, listen, when we're on this call, nothing's recorded. It's right here. So air it out. And it's great because you get to hear where people are really at, as opposed to what their public, face has to be. It's actually sad because it creates, when there's that kind of gap between who you are and who you're being told to be, and you have to go be that, every time you are that other person, it just wears you down inside. So I talk a lot about burnout. I talk a lot about stress and anxiety. What causes that? Well, being somebody other than yourself causes that. So I know it's a long-winded answer.
No, it's great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's interesting, Dana, when you look at sports, I always look at guys like Bill Belichick or Nick Saban, like they don't change. And they know that a lot of what they do is not popular. Even players have said, what a difficult environment it is. Although if you watch like Man in the Arena with Tom Brady, they're pretty happy when they win those championships and they wind up loving coach, but he doesn't waver. He is who he is.
You know where Scott, as you're saying that, where you can see a great demonstration of uncapped be yourself leadership in small business.
Yep.
Like a local small business. I think of even some local pizza shops. I mean, they're loud, they could be obnoxious, they love their food. There's in small business,
right,
you can really see people show who they are. And when you take that person and you compare it to what you see in big business or corporate business, there's a big gap. Between just the freedom of everything versus, the corporate structures that are built.
Right.
So I'm not saying one is, being totally crazy, unless you are, is the answer for everybody. But it's just fun to see the difference between big business and small business, full authenticity, and then being told how to be.
Right. No, exactly. We are actually going to be in Florida here for Alex Smith. So Alex, you're up.
Dana, what's going on, man? Hey, I have so many good notes in here. The first chapter you have, and you talked about it, you gotta, hate to lose more than you love to win. And as an Orioles fan, I had to get used to a lot of losing, and you guys beat us a ton. And so I used to hate you, not you personally, but the Yankees, because you were so good. I'm still not over Jeffrey Mayer, but my question has to do with losing, because I loved what you said. Like, you just gotta, hate to lose, and like, everyone bounds together and say like, we're like, losing isn't acceptable, and we're winning, and we're all on this. I'm wondering, some of the probably best learnings or moments that you've learned something in your career probably came from your greatest losses. So I'm kind of curious, like in your career, if you have a story of, if I could take you back to like something that was just a crushing loss for you, and maybe what was the greatest insight, or what was the greatest thing that you learned from some of your greatest losses?
Well, the thing is, I lose every day, like in some way. That's the truth. Like I'm always losing. Like I lose a lot more than I win. Whether it be going after a deal, whether it be a client, whether it be, just whatever, a challenge that I set myself up to that I lose on. So I always put that out there as a coach. Like I'm definitely not perfect, because nobody is. I unfortunately am one of those people that chases perfection, even though it's not possible. And I feel like I lose a lot more, but we're always losing. So in my career, one of my losses was when I left the team. I wanted to leave within a year or two of where I did, but my contract didn't get renewed. And I had a choice. Do I want to go with another team, or do I want to end with the best? And I said, okay, I mean, I know the Orioles are what they are, and the Red Sox are what they are, but in my mind, I wanted to leave with the best. And that losing led me to doing what I do now. And in every part of my life, there's been acceleration from that point of loss, right? There's been gain in every position, from the amount of time I have now versus the amount of time that I had financially now versus what I had. The relationships that I've built now versus what I had, right? There's been acceleration in every category. So that was the result of, losing, but it was not losing because I would say you have to lose to win, because you have to know that you hate losing so that you chase winning. So too often we settle, we just say, oh, I'll just do this. And I see it even with guys that I used to work with in the organization. I said, man, these guys were so talented. And look at them. They're doing the same thing they did 10 years ago. There's no new challenge, but they're so comfortable.
I'm going to go outside.
Unwilling to change, right? They're unwilling to do something new. So we got to be very open to losing. And sometimes it may be, and by the way, I'm not telling everybody to leave what you're currently doing, but it is a theme in the book that says, hey, try something new, right? You like how I weave that something new in there?
Thank you, Dana.
But try something new in order to, and it may feel like a loss or a fail initially, but you'll see if you keep attacking, you start to build momentum. And anyway, you have to lose to win, but you have to hate to lose, because losing sucks.
It does. Chad in California, you're up.
Actually, coming from my mobile office here in the West Indies, in the island called St. Kitts.
Wow,
No, I'm joking. It's just the background. Coach, great to see you again. I know it's been a year. However, I feel like I'm very connected reading your daily emails, which has been mind-blowing, very insightful, very learning. If anyone hasn't subscribed to his daily emails, I highly encourage. A lot of nuggets in there. With that said, I think this correlates to the topic of conversation today, and we'll piggyback on Derek Jeter, the captain. In one of your recent emails 2 weeks ago, you had talked about how you stepped into the organization, and like everyone's talking about Jeter being the captain, and I'm just not seeing it. If you can shed light on it, you don't have to get too into the weeds, but and you talk about leaders and captains and how do they resonate with their folks. Can you shed light of how you learned how Derek Jeter led, that maybe you probably teach today and coach today the leaders to lead like Jeter did?
So interesting enough, that post that I wrote a blog on it. I do a daily newsletter, but I posted it on a LinkedIn. It's at like, I think I want to say like 45,000 views, which for me is one of my best ever. And I think about it, well, why was that? Right? We were talking about somebody that's iconic. I also said I wasn't impressed with his leadership when I first got there because I didn't understand it. But the more I was around that guy, and the more I'm around a lot of people that are really good at what they do, you don't understand it right away because there's not a lot of smoke and mirrors with these sort of folks. But the longer you're around them, there's a feeling that they give you. And the feeling is actually based on two words I like to use: safety and security. When you're around these people, and I think this is a great attribute of great leaders, they make you feel safe and they make you feel secure. And when you feel safe and you feel secure, it goes back to Maslow's hierarchy, right? These are human needs that need to be taken care of. So for many people, if you were to interview a large sample of people and ask them, hey, do you feel safe and do you feel secure? A lot of people would tell you no. So where these great leaders have an advantage is they come in and they make you feel that way. And then by them making you feel that way, there's an attachment, there's a loyalty, there's a bond that emerges from that feeling. So that's how great leaders, they have what I call magnetism. They just continue to attract people to them. And that's what a guy like Derek Jeter always presented in his, way of being, not his way of talking, right? He wasn't a talker. He was more of a connector. So, and most people think leadership is the guy on the hill shouting, but it's not always that. I mean, there's some people, again, that's a style for some, and that's okay. But for others, that's not their style, and that's okay too.
It's just so cool. Last comment here. I was fortunate to be a part of a conversation with the former president of all of UPS, Jerry Matz, who actually, Scott, reminds me, I'd love to get onto a TCC. And one of his things is like, hey, I didn't shout from the top. I went to the bottom and I would leave little notes to all the employees in the warehouse to build their, give them inspiration and feel motivated so that they can drive, make their deliveries a little bit faster, increase their times. And he's like, I worked all the way from the bottom to the top, not from the top to the bottom. So awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Chad, if you think about it, or anybody here, think about that boss or that leader that came next to you and just kind of gave you a little pat when you're a young guy or gal, and that person like made you feel just in that, like, hey, I know you exist. It's like, wow, unbelievable. I have a client and he flipped his business twice for a couple $100 million. And he said his favorite thing to do was walk the warehouse floor. And he used to bust those guys' chops. He used to buy lunch for them on Fridays, and he'd be down, having a pizza party with the guys that are packing boxes and having a blast, and a genuine blast. Not, I do this because it's what I'm supposed to do. I read this in Jack Welch's book and they did it because he wanted to. And that is the type of stuff that I'm talking about that goes a long way. That's getting in the trench, and that's powerful leadership.
And also, Jerry, I'll reach out to him and I'll see if he's open for an introduction. I think it'd be a great introduction to you as well.
Absolutely love it. Absolutely would love it. Mike in Colorado, you're up.
Hey, thanks, Scott. Hey, Coach, good to talk to you again.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm doing all right.
All right.
Listen, something I'm struggling with that I think you could help. We've chatted about this a couple times. It's similar topic. So, in my own advisory business with tech startups, one of the companies I'm helping kind of build out their sales force right now. So we're doing a lot of hiring, a lot of profiling, developing a customer profile, an ideal sales rep and leadership profile. And most of this business has evolved, I think it's because of COVID, into less of an advisory and more of a couch coaching type business, where so many people, whether business is good or not, they're struggling. So this one CEO wants to hire unicorn after unicorn after unicorn. And I can't get through to this guy because personally, there's a little bit of art and science and sales, just like in life, that you have to blend the two, and you have to be dynamic and adapt to the audience that you're with. And he wants a unicorn. He wants the perfect person on paper every time. And I always had a lot of success hiring athletes, good experience, but maybe not the most, but athletes who will break through that wall, will crush it. They will do what you say, they will train, they will work. Do you have any advice for how to get through to this guy? Because nothing is getting through, and he keeps rejecting all the people that we're bringing forward. And I'm kind of out of advice for him outside of, it might be time to fire myself from working with him. But short of that, he's a good human. He's just stuck in his ways. So any thoughts?
Well, again, good humans and good leaders and good people to work for, they're all different, you know? So he could be a good human, a guy you like to hang out with and have a couple beers with, but a guy that you're like, but I can't work for that guy because he's a pain in the ass and he drives me crazy and he doesn't listen to me. So if he hires you as counsel for something, that means he respects you enough to where what you're bringing to the table should be enough. And if it's not, you know, there may be a deeper issue there. But the other thing I like to do is I like to ask a lot of questions. So when I coach, I ask a lot of questions. And one of the questions would be, you know, what are the key characteristics and traits that you're looking for in a unicorn? What defines a unicorn? And then if you find these people that are athletes that have those characteristics and those traits, you know, they may show up in a different size and package and look than he's used to, but they have the traits that he identified. So you're sort of you're using his words to validate your point. You're using what he's looking for to validate what you found. So there's that. But if that doesn't work, then it may just not be a good fit for you. And when I say something like that, I understand too that in business, it's hard to earn business. It's hard to retain business. It's hard to when somebody hires you as a consultant and they're paying you, you also have a choice, right? Do I do what I do and take the money? Or do I say, I'm not doing this because, and there's that fine line. And I've noticed that even with coaching, like there's some people that just want me to be in their life, and they're willing to pay for it. There's other people that are looking for something deeper. And I've had to have this conversation. And you have to also know what it is that you want to do and like to do and how you like to do it. And then you also have to understand what somebody else is looking for. So there's a fine balance. So if it's something that you're getting frustrated over and it's detracting from your personal vitality and you're getting frustrated and you're not able to accept, you know, his behavior towards what it is you're bringing, then you have to exit. If it's something that could be worked through by having him define what he's actually looking for, and when you bring that actual something that he's looking for and he rejects it, that's a deeper case for your exit or, again, another conversation. But it sounds like there's just another gap that's existing between what you know will work and what he thinks will work. And the other thing I would ask him is why he hired you.
Yeah, you know, that's a good point. He actually talked up front. It was the background of tech advisory and sales management experience. But remember, I pointed out at the beginning, he's a good human. So I've been giving him a chance because he's a good person. I've seen him treat a lot of people well, but I'm thinking that our next step is a coaching step where he has to understand he's got a blind spot. He thinks salespeople are just puzzle pieces. You get the best, you plug them in, they're on autopilot. They're people. They bleed, they cry, they hurt, they succeed, right? And
well, the
and
one
they have
thing,
skills.
yeah, and you know this, dealing with salespeople, I have found salespeople to be some of the most emotional people on the team. So they do all of those things. You know, they're emotional when they're doing well. They feel great. When they're not, watch out. They're like manic, you know, in a way. So it's but I do think it probably involves a deeper conversation with him and letting him know what your role is with his you know, within what he hired you for. And if you can't do what you're hired for, then why are you doing it?
Thanks, Coach. Always great to hear from you.
Yeah, likewise.
Great advice. We're going to try to squeeze in a couple more. So Randy in Florida, you're up.
Thank you. Coach, nice to see you. My question is kind of like this. Sounds like you're dealing with a lot of high profile people. And when you're dealing with them, their behind the scenes persona is one thing, but in reality, comes off a little different, right? But I'm dealing, and I think most of the people on this call deal with not people who are in the public eye. And what I've found is that by being open with them, it's almost like an invitation for them to be open. And it sounds like in your style, when you're asking a lot of questions of these leaders, you're showing some of your own vulnerability, which kind of gives them, you know, that safety and security that you described. Is that kind
Randy,
of true?
listen,
and do you see where things are going in that direction?
yeah. I mean, I give them exactly what I'm giving you.
Right.
So for me, what you see is what you get always, right? And that's what I try to give them, you know, the opportunity. Hey, if I'm going to be like this, you could be like that. And the other thing I do is I call them out on their bullshit. When they're acting, you know, the corporate line, when they're walking that line, you can't coach somebody that's not real. So if somebody can't be real with you, I'm not going to sit here and fail because you can't be honest with yourself. You know, so you give people the invite, and some people, we have to understand this. You know, when you're in the business world for 20, 30 years, that could be 20 to 30 years of living and presenting yourself in a way you think you're supposed to present yourself. Some folks have lost their way. They have lost who they really are. They don't even know anymore. So as a coach, I always find it's my job to help them get back to who that person is and give them, again, permission. And not that I'm a god, but I find like when you tell someone, hey, you know, you can just be yourself. And you'll see when you say that to somebody who they really are. And some people won't know. So yeah, you give them the opportunity to be who they are by you being who you are.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
You got it, Randy. Thank you.
Steve Thomas, it's all yours.
Thanks, Coach. Real pleasure to talk to you. Big
Hey,
fan
Steve.
of the newsletter and LinkedIn
Thank you.
content that you provide.
Thank you.
Quick question. If you're taking over leadership of a team, what would be the top thing that you would suggest to the team members to become more accountable?
Accountable? I don't know
Yes.
if I would suggest anything as much as I would tell them that, hey, my job as a leader is to hold you accountable. So be ready because I'm coming for you. That means you got to cross your T's, dot your I's, and be ready for me. And
Gotcha.
that right there sets, I'm very big and I write about it, setting a tone right away. So they know the expectation. And when you come, they know you're coming. And that right there will help you as a leader, you know, sort through who are the actual unicorns and who are the people that are just there wasting your time and burning your cash. So I believe that, you know, you just have to let people know how it's going to be. That's, you know, it's like making that first statement and always going back to it. The other thing I wrote about in the new book was this. I spoke with a guy and I really enjoyed him. His name was Ken Rusk, and he runs what's called Rusk Industries in Dayton, Ohio. And he was a guy that hated school and ended up generating and creating quite a bit of wealth in, you know, digging and excavating and things like that. And he wrote a book called Blue Collar Cash, which I really liked. And he talked about knowing every person on your team. You got to know what they want. Why are they here? What does winning mean to them? And what he did that was cool was when everyone was in the offices, he put it up. So every day he'd go up and say, okay, Johnny wants this. He wants a new house, buy this. Let me talk and check in with him and see where we're at. So you're holding everybody accountable through what it is that they say that they want. And when you go back to what somebody says they want and you use that as an accountability source,
Right.
That's another helpful way of getting them on your side and you being on their side. So again, I
Appreciate the suggestion. Great
Yeah.
advice.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve.
It's interesting.
Working on my
Dana.
handwriting too.
Dana's got the best handwriting of anyone I've ever seen.
Thank you.
So it's interesting what you just said, because I think, you know, setting that tone early is the opposite advice that most people get as a leader. So most leaders are told, like, come in, sit back, assess the situation, and they're not really taught to impose their thoughts and like, this is the way we're going to play the game, business, sports, whatever. But when you look at, I don't know why it's popping into my head, but Bill Parcells, every time Bill Parcells went in, like, boom, the culture of a team changed instantaneously.
Yeah. And if like I've been with Bill several times, he controls the room. He just comes in to control the room, but he does it in a way where when you listen to him, from his booming voice to his presentation, he delivers the feeling again of safety and security. Yep. He makes you feel like, hey, guys, we got this. There's no question. This is what we're going to do. And this is something that I saw, and not to get political, but when you look at COVID, you see people want to get in, they want to be told what to do. So when somebody of authority says what to do, the majority of people will do it. They get in line to do it. So we just watched, what I'm talking about live, how you can get a whole nation to work together towards something, to do something, because there was safety and there was security in mind. And when leadership said, do this and you will get this being safety and security, what did people do? They aligned to it. So there was a great takeaway lesson here that we all got to watch live for the last couple of years. I mean, obviously it's nothing to talk lightly about, but we saw it. What happens when somebody comes in, when there's people speaking with safety and security in mind and saying, this is what we're going to do, people will do it. And if you look at your organization the same way, somebody has to own what it is we're going to do. People are looking for direction. We are brought up in a society where we sit in a classroom and we look at this one figure in the front of the room that tells us what to do, and we do it. So the conditioning of the human spirit in America is built on being told what to do. It's a leader's job to tell people what to do. That's it. I mean, that is leadership. Tell people what to do. And by the way, if what they do leads to a bad outcome, that's your fault as the leader. And if what they do leads to a good outcome, great job as a leader. But your job is to tell people what to do, because here's the secret. People want to be told what to do. They want to be told what to do. There's no doubt about it.
Everyone says they don't want to be micromanaged.
Total lie.
I totally agree. People want to know, what do you expect of me and what do you want me to do?
Yeah. And Scott, those people that say that, they don't want to be micromanaged. Most of them do. And the ones that don't, you know what they do? They go out and they start their own company. Or they become the leaders within an organization. So it's self-sorting.
I agree. I agree.
If you think about your business, there had to be a point where you said, hey, I don't want to be told what to do. So you go and for whatever the reasons are, you start your own thing, right?
Yeah. I finally figured out I was not a great employee. And even though I was successful, I was built to kind of make my own decisions.
Yeah.
Dana, do we have time for one more question?
Yeah. Cool.
Morgan, we're ending with you, upstate New York.
All right. Thanks, Scott. Hey, Coach, fellow farmer. Hey, and by the way, Scott, I don't know if I'm comfortable with the closer role. I am no Mariano Rivera.
Come on, right? You got to own it.
Yeah. No, I know. It's all good. Hey, somewhat related to the question that Alex asked before. A little different take on it, right? I'd like to hear your thoughts around resilience. We've talked a lot about resilience in the TCC, specifically around managing performance through adversity. I mean, you see it in sports. You have, I think, a bit more control of it over in sports than you do farming, right? I mean, you have an opponent that you simply cannot beat in farming. It's nature. Yeah. It's always going to get you, right? So, how do you coach people to maintain high levels of performance through adversity?
Yeah. I was told something early in my career by the first strength coach I ever worked under. His name was Jeff Mangold. And he told me something like, we were dealing with weather. We were dealing with all sorts of shit. And he told me this. He said, I want you to never forget this. He said, the great ones adjust. the great ones always adjust. And I took that and I said, well, what does that really mean? And it means that we're always going to have to adjust. So the resilience comes from one's openness to adjustment. And oftentimes people have a stubbornness as it relates to, this is how I do it. This is how I've done it. This is how we do it. This is how we've done it. But resilience also comes from an openness to do something different, to try something different, to try something new. So when you do that, there it is again.
You're good at that.
You know, you have an opportunity to always peek through, right? You're always the sun peeking through the clouds because you're not stuck in this one way of doing it. And people get really down on themselves. They get really frustrated, and they have high levels of friction when they just keep trying to do something the same way, and they're not able to. But I look at things like this. You're not able to for a reason. So stop trying to do it the same way, because that is going to cause you frustration and friction. And those are two ingredients that are not good for getting through all of that adversity. So I would just say, remember, the great ones always adjust. And a story I told in my book, the first one, Habits of a Champion Team, was about this woman I met in her 90s. And she told me that, hey, it never gets easier, just so you know. Like we have this illusion that, well, when I'm older, it should get easier. Or the longer I do this, the easier it gets. It's like, no, whoever told you that? So be ready for battle, be ready to compete at all times, but most importantly, be open. And if someone's pushing against you or something is pushing against you, don't always fight back against it hard. Sometimes you got to let it go. Early in my career, I did martial arts. And one of the principles was in Aikido is don't resist, go and flow. And sometimes when things are coming against you, if you force it, you're going to expend a lot of energy. But if you let it go, it goes by. So it's something to always remember.
Guys, this is what CEOs, billionaires, the Derek Jeters of the world have gotten to learn from. So I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation with Dana. Dana, I cannot thank you enough.
Thanks, Scott.
We are now a community of almost 500 people in 29 countries. What can we do to help support you even more?
Geez, the one thing I always say is this is like my own sick thing, but I always enjoy, buy beef. That's good. But I actually always enjoy staying in touch with everybody on LinkedIn. So, the comments, the likes, I see them all, and I try to respond as much as I can, because I put a lot of time into my messaging, and I put a lot of time into studying all of this. So when I put something out there, I try to deliver as much as I can to people. So when it's validated, and if it sucks, you please tell me. And when it's good, please tell me. And I appreciate that. That's the best gift that you can give. So thank you. And thank
Phenomenal.
you all for today.
Coach, appreciate it. Appreciate you. Best to Lauren. Enjoy that sunny weather, and maybe we'll see you up on the farm.
Yeah, anytime, man. So
sounds
cool.
good.
All right,
sounds good.
everybody.
If anyone wants to stay for overtime, feel free. Coach, thank you again.
Thanks, guys.